And so, good morning, members and friends and visitors on this warm and safe morning at home on this, has it begun, had it snowed last night at all? As you peered out the window, we are Zooming this morning, Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. We begin with words of Donald Hall. He's a former poet laureate whose reverie I think you might have shared when you awoke this AM and, like a little kid that you once were, peered out the window into magic. And as he says, every year the first good snow sets me dreaming. By March, it will only bring grumps, but the first real snow is reverence, a dreamy restitution of childhood. Tighten the door and settle a cloth snake against the breeze from the door's bottom, you hear Mom call, and make sure the storm doors are shut firmly. You picture your dad adding logs to the stove and widening the draft. And you're looking out the window and you're watching the magic happen. Serious winter is here. And now, let us join virtually as I ring the bowl as a call to service. Listening to the sound, however it may resonate in your homes. And then, of course, the silence. In that silence, we open our hearts to this day and to what we bring to each other. And now the prayer. All right. Well, welcome again. My name is Annie Lappin, and I am your service leader this morning. We are pleased to welcome back to our pulpit Adrian L.H. Graham, our guest speaker this morning, who is Zooming from Frederick, Maryland. Adrian, as some might recall, was with us for Mother's Day service last May. He describes himself as a lover of the natural world and of human culture, especially as manifest through food, music, language, and religious expression. Considering himself a evangelist, he served as a full-time membership professional for 9 years with the UU congregation of Rockville, and currently serves as Director of Congregational Life at River Road UU Congregation in Bethesda and as Secretary of the UU Commission on Appraisal. Adrian is the author of the 2015 UUA pamphlet, Finding What We Believe, which addresses common questions about our UU beliefs. He also is an aspirant to Unitarian Universalist Ministry and has been a member of the First Unitarian Church of Baltimore since 2003, although he now resides in Frederick County with his husband Joel and their adorable cream tabby kittens, Rufus and Tammy. His sermon is titled, Where is Our Holy Church? Adrian writes, ours is a living tradition. Our individual and shared religious experiences are alive and growing and changing with time, not ossified into a creed outworn, as the poet Wordsworth might say. In the new year, with all its traditions of renewal and recommitment, we'll take an invigorating look at who we profess to be and who we actually are, and ask ourselves how much space exists between the two. And I look forward to that, and I know you do as well. But first, gratitude to the collective talents of several exceptional people in our congregation. Always Darlene and David, of course, and Nancy and David Beeler, and our guest Adrian Graham for the time and their generosity and talents in enabling this Zoom service. I mentioned David Beeler, who is always the one who takes our Zoomed services and gets them ready to be on YouTube. And we thank him for that every single Sunday, including this one. Just a couple announcements. February 1, coming up, Stewardship Drive kickoff. The theme this year is Spirituality in Action. And you'll be hearing a lot more of that. And on that service, we always have a lovely lunch and we come back and we get the pamphlets and we learn all about stewardship. And it's one you'll for sure want to attend. February 7th, multi-generational game night at UUCR right in our sanctuary. And then March 7th, looking ahead, is the annual auction. It's our major fundraiser. And so be thinking now of what you want to have in the auction, items as well as services. And that is the end of that. So now let us breathe as we embark on today's service. Let us lay down any burdens from the outside world. Take a moment and imagine a world of peace that we long for. May this hour together bring dreams and new ways of being together in our world. Come, let us worship together. And now Adrian will be leading us in the chalice lighting. Because we're on Zoom, we will stay mute. You can say the words in your heart. They were in the order of service if you copied it out that Darlene sent. Adrian.
Thank you, Annie. And yes, it's delightful to be together with you again, despite the shift in location. It's still a good time to be together. I will light my home chalice as I read these words by Deborah Falk. And if you have a chalice or a candle handy and you would like to light yours in your own home, feel free to do so as well. The Chalice is a Symbol by Deborah Falk. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundations of freedom, reason, and welcome, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that envisions a world flourishing with equality for all people, a faith that demands living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This small flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us.
And now our first hymn will be Where is Our Holy Church? And we will be listening to this on the video.
Where is our holy church, where race and class unite, as equal persons in the search for beauty, truth, and right? Where is our holy writ, where'er a human heart the sacred torch of truth has lit by inspiration taught? Where is our Holy One? Almighty host respond. The people rise in every land to break the captive's bond. Where is our holy land? Within the human soul, wherever free minds truly seek with character the goal. Where is our paradise? Can aspiration sight, wherein we hope to see arise 10,000 years of right?
And now for our opening words. And so on most Sundays, unlike today, as we motor toward UUCR, passing a number of perfectly fine churches where good people much like ourselves are sitting, hymnals close by, at the same hour, We've all given up the pleasures of sleeping in and paging through the Post or the Times with early AM coffee to be in fellowship with each other at the beginning of a new week. And why is that exactly? Why this church? Why this beloved community? Our answers would be interesting to hear, as uniquely individual as each of us. And yet I'm thinking with shades of overlap as well, reflecting our reasons of why each of us decided to come to UUCR in the first place, and then decided to keep coming. Present tense, decide to keep coming. For each time, including today, is a new commitment to be part of this faith community. For most of us, prior to being here, our church experience has been as a member of a creedal church, one that requires a creed, agreed upon set of beliefs, and that may be one of the variety of reasons that we moved on. As we know, UU is a covenant faith. What unites us is not a set of beliefs, but mutual promises and shared values about how we agree to be in relationship with each other, love and support each other as we pursue our beliefs, our own path that we create every single day as we navigate our lives, determining our own truth. In today's sermon, Adrian will speak to us of how this UU faith is a living faith, where there is breath and growth and change. What came to my mind as I read this were the words of Reverend Doug Kraft, and he says the following: Unitarian Universalism is not a rock to hold on to. It is a river to swim in. If you want a set of rigid, unchanging beliefs to hold on to, if you want rules to guide your life in all situations, if you want a foundation for a spiritual fortress, you will probably be disappointed in us. However, if you want to dive into the river and explore, if you think that what you experience and what you do is more important than what you believe, if you want to be with people who engage in this world to promote well-being for all, they have something to offer. Life itself is more like a river than a rock. Life is in flux. It changes, it twists, it turns, it ebbs and flows. When a river encounters a boulder, the boulder may win for a while, but eventually even the most massive stone is worn away by the currents of time. Unitarian Universalism is about learning to swim in the river rather than climbing out of it onto a rock. As the world moves and changes and society reflects this, Unitarian Universalism does as well. So may it be. And now we have acknowledgments of the heart, which will be a little different than we have when we're. Are there any others? Well, then I will virtually light the final candle for all the joys and the concerns that are in our hearts that are unspoken. And I'm sure there are many. And perhaps people are a little reticent this morning of having their face appear on the screen for an indefinitely long time. I know the feeling, but we're in this together. So let's keep those joys and concerns in our hearts, and we'll have a moment just to settle with them, and we move ahead together. And blessed be. And at this time in the service, Adrian and I will be doing the responsive reading together. It is entitled, It Matters What We Believe by Sophia Leon Boz. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged.
Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies.
Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days and fears of unknown calamities.
Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness.
Some beliefs are divisive, separating saved from unsaved, friends from enemies.
Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern.
Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction.
Other beliefs are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration.
Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness.
Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth.
Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world.
Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling ever growing with the upward thrust of life.
And now, thank you, Adrian, for choosing these hymns today. We have never sung them, and I'm grateful that we're not singing them because they look a little challenging, but the words are exceptionally beautiful and fit today's service. So great gratefulness for that. And also for being together through Zoom. Never realized that Portugal was so close by, and it was so great to see Paul, Marilyn, and each of you. And so now, please join me in a time of quiet, of meditation, as you're in your own homes and you can settle down and take a breath. Rest your mind from thinking. Howard Thurman, 20th century African American theologian, shares these words. Let them touch your heart. And he says, how good it is to center down, to sit quietly and see oneself pass by. The streets of our minds seethe with endless traffic. Our spirits resound with clashing, with noisy silence, while something deep within hungers and thirsts for the still moment and the resting lull. With full intensity, we seek a fresh sense of order in our living, a direction, a strong, sure purpose that will structure our confusion and bring meaning in our chaos. We look at ourselves in this waiting moment, the kinds of people we are. The questions persist. What are we doing with our lives? What are the motives that order our days? Where are we trying to go? Where are we putting emphasis, and where are our values focused? For what end do we make sacrifices? Where is my treasure, and what do I love most in life? To what am I true? Floating up through all of the jangling echoes of our turbulence, there is a sound of another kind, a deeper note which only the stillness of the heart makes clear. For a few moments, I invite you to sit with Thurman's question, Where is your treasure? And what do you love most? What does the stillness of your heart make clear? And now, Adrian Graham will speak to us on Where is Our Holy Church?
Thank you, Annie. That was lovely. Thank you all once again for the invitation to be with you once more this morning in this cold and snowy winter day. It is good to see you all here on Zoom and to be together. So much has changed. So much has changed since the 18th and 19th centuries when Universalism and Unitarianism rooted themselves in the United States. Since the middle of the 20th century when they merged to form our current Unitarian Universalist Association. Since last May when I first visited you to lead a service. Since last November when we held national elections here in the United States. Since last month when I first submitted the blurb to Annie describing what I had wanted to speak to you about this morning. Since last week when hundreds of my colleagues, Unitarian Universalist ministers and religious professionals from across the country made their way to Minneapolis in witness and solidarity. Since just yesterday when 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Pretty, who was named earlier, was shot and killed by federal agents there. So much has changed. If I had to sum it up in one word, I think what I wanted to talk to you about today was hypocrisy. I may have shared with you last year that one of my motivations for leaving the tradition of my childhood and youth was that I could not reconcile the things that I was learning in Sunday school, in Bible study, and worship services with my own observations and my own lived experience as a gay Black male living in US society. I could not reconcile the words that said, Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, with the message that being gay is a sin and I would burn in hell for all eternity for who I was and am. The mismatch between the teachings of the church as professed in its words and the teachings of the church as modeled by its example in the world was too great of a burden for my fierce sense of justice and fairness. Besides, it just did not make sense. Nothing made sense. And because I felt my very life was at stake, I left. I left in search of something that I didn't have to fight with, something that made sense in my head and felt right in my heart, something that made me feel as though it walked the talk and left me knowing that I was whole and loved and blessed just as I am. As a new UU in the late 90s, I immersed myself in the early thought of our then separate traditions, reading everything that was offered to me by every minister of every congregation that I had the opportunity to participate in. I joined classes with other newbies and seekers to grapple with ideas and meaning that had real relevance in my life. Perhaps some of you are familiar with this story because it is your story. Perhaps some of you are living this chapter of your religious journeys at this very moment, soaking up with awe and wonder at all the things that you wish you could have heard from the churches and synagogues and mosques and temples and living rooms of your upbringing. Do you sit in amazement that such a thing as Unitarian Universalism exists? Do you sit in befuddlement that it took you so long to find out about it? I know that was part of my story, and it sometimes still is a part of it. Like our cousins in the United Church of Christ, with their catchy motto reminding the world that God is still speaking, we Unitarian Universalists claim to be part of a living tradition, a tradition that is not stagnant, at a standstill, long dead, and regurgitating outdated and outmoded creeds that no one really believes. Or if they do believe them, maybe they don't understand them. No, no, we Unitarian Universalists have evolved beyond that, right? We have refined our religious impulses to become better than we had been. Onward and upward, as our Unitarian forebears might have shouted with glee. On the surface of it, you would think that we would be the people most comfortable with change, wouldn't you? On the 5th of May, 1819, at the ordination of Jarrett Sparks, the first minister of my home congregation, now known as the First Unitarian Church of Baltimore, Universalist and Unitarian, minister and theologian William Ellery Channing preached a sermon titled Unitarian Christianity, essentially throwing down the gauntlet and proclaiming formal separation of Unitarianism from its less progressive kin in the Congregationalist Church. Ironically, the kin that have since become the United Church of Christ that I mentioned a few moments ago. In his sermon, Channing begins by stating that the circumstances of the day, quote, demand a departure from the course generally followed, end quote. He then goes on to speak for quite a long time about the beliefs and characteristics of the Unitarianism of his day. Most notably, he founds everything that follows on a profound appeal to the use of reason, showing how the standing doctrines of the Christian churches of the day do not bear out when approached critically using our God-given senses. Notably, he says, quote, with these views of the Bible, we feel it our bounden duty to exercise our reason upon it perpetually, to compare, to infer, to look beyond the letter of the Spirit, to seek the nature of the subject and the aim of the writer, his true meaning, and, in general, to make use of what is known for explaining what is difficult and for discovering new truths. End quote. To exercise our reason perpetually, that is part of our great heritage. 19 years later, in an address to the graduating senior class at Harvard Divinity School, another of our forebears, Ralph Waldo Emerson, spoke to those who would be charged with caring for the flock about the human spirit and virtue, what he calls the religious sentiment. And again, our use of reason and our grappling with scripture. But he goes further to illustrate how this impulse is a human impulse and that it not only exists within Unitarianism, nor only within Christianity writ large, but in the whole of humanity with its wide diversity of beliefs and practices around ultimate truth. He preaches to these new ministers that not only reason, but also inner intuition have their rightful and necessary place in our lives. This intuition is something he claims cannot be received at second hand. Reason can be taught. Intuition is something we experience. According to Emerson, both are essential and both ought receive their due weight. He goes on to decry what he considers the habit of others within Christianity to base their faith on teachings about Jesus rather than the teachings of Jesus, of worshiping the traditions of their religious institutions to the neglect of a direct experience of the God to which those institutions claim to point. One of my favorite quotes comes from this address later, when he tells these ministers, "It is the office of a true teacher to show us that God is, not was, that God speaks, not spoke." Sounds a lot like God is still speaking, and we have a living tradition. Or, as Annie shared with us earlier in her reading, a river to swim in rather than a rock to cling to. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly what the quote was, but it made sense and it resonates in this moment. My question is, are we listening? Are we swimming? Or have we stopped embodying this heritage that we receive and become like those that we differentiated ourselves from in the past? Speaking of the past, let's take one more quick look. Just 3 years after Emerson's address, Unitarian minister and abolitionist Theodore Parker preached a sermon at yet another ordination. You all are going to have to go to more ordinations to get the good stuff. He preached at the ordination of Charles Shackford in Boston, a sermon titled "The Transient and Permanent in Christianity." You may have heard of this one as well. In his sermon, he essentially goes on to explain that there are forms in our religious experience that are temporary, particular, and fleeting, while others are deeper and everlasting, universal truths experienced by all, despite our diverse differences. These three sermons, different as they are, have so much to say and do so much more eloquently than I have been able to share with you this morning. And I hope that you'll take some time to read them and investigate their teachings, whether you're already familiar with them or not. I believe that they illustrate the ways that we, modern Unitarian Universalists, believe ourselves set apart, not only in history, but today. We profess a trust in reason and hope in intuition, and the ability to discern the transient and fleeting from the foundational and permanent. I started this morning by telling you that if I had to express it in a word, what I had originally wanted to talk to you about today was hypocrisy. And I wanted to talk to you about hypocrisy because in reading these early texts again, I wondered whether we have become like those we distinguish ourselves from in becoming the kind of faith community that leans on the boulder, that clings to the way we always did things, that is afraid of change, that leans on tradition and ignores the Spirit speaking to us today. I think I wanted to talk to you about that out of my own personal experiences and disappointments over the decades with Unitarian Universalism. We profess so many ideals that are high and lofty and frankly difficult. It is no wonder that we don't meet them from time to time. No one can meet them all of the time. None of us is perfect. I wonder what our effort is. And as I began, I said so much has changed in all of this time, and so much has changed since December when I was maybe a little overly upset with Unitarian Universalism and trying to figure out a nice way to be mean about Unitarian Universalists and get us to think about what we say and who we are, the words that we speak, and the behaviors that we embody. We claim to be anti-racist and fighting against white supremacy and all of those things. And then we resist the hard work of change. We are comfortable as things are. and we profess things that we sometimes don't live out. At the same time, at the very same time, we are a people who are living our values in the world. We are people who speak out at injustice when our government is murdering citizens in the streets and then claiming to do so out of self-defense or out of fear because they found that that excuse resonates with people or that it gets them off the hook. We are people who will name the evils and the injustice that we see in the world and do what we can to make a difference. I am pleased that this year the UUA has chosen the work by Deepa Iyer for us to use as our common read. It reminds us that no one person can do all of the things. I hope that you remember with your ministers. I'm not talking just to you in this Chester River congregation, all you congregations. Remember that your ministers are people and that they can't do everything. They cannot be everything, nor should we expect any of us to embody all the roles that are possible in the world. I have not yet read this book by Deepa Iyer, but I am looking forward to it, where she shows us that some of us have the role of caretaker. Some of us have the role of justice seeker. Some of us have a role of, building up. Some of us have the role of tearing down. It's good to discern what our individual gifts are so that we can name the roles that we have and to do those well and not to feel badly when we are not doing well the other roles that are not ours to inhabit. So, some of us have traveled to Minnesota. Many of us did not. Should we feel badly about that? No, maybe that is not our work to do. In fact, many of my colleagues who look like me have been advised not to travel out of our own safety for our own safety. And so discerning, using that inner intuition that Emerson reminds us of, is our heritage. Listening to spirit in this moment is our heritage. We don't have to do things the way we always did them before, nor must we each and all do everything that has been done. If we work together and each do our part, that is much more effective and much more faithful to the traditions that we claim to embody as Unitarian Universalists today. So I hope that we remember that we are the heirs of folks who believe in the use of reasoning. We look at what's happening, we refine it through reason, and we trust our intuition. We listen to one another. We seek counsel from those who are different from us and let them challenge our precepts and our own beliefs. And then we live those values in the world. In his sermon, William Ellery Channing, towards the end, spoke directly to Jared Sparks, the minister who was being ordained, and admonished him to let his life speak more loudly than his words, than his lips, is what he said. Mind you, he had just spoken for hours, probably, on very heady theological things, picking apart doctrines and showing why Unitarians could not accept the theology of the Trinitarian societies of which they were a part. Very methodically, that's the word I'm looking for. Very methodically, very academic, very intellectual for hours and hours and hours. And only at the end, for a moment, he had a human connection with the minister being ordained. And he counseled him. He said, your job as the minister of this congregation is not to do what I just did. It's to care for the people and to lead by example, to let your life preach more loudly than your lips. I think that speaks to the opposite of hypocrisy. Maybe, maybe. I think it has the potential to. And so, my hope for all of us is that we will receive our faith through our reason in conversation with our intuition, so much so that it changes who we are and how we live in the world, so that by our living, people will know that we are the good guys, not the bad guys, and that they will want to be changed as well. That, I believe, is a saving message of Unitarian Universalism, that we can have hope and that it can change us through the power of love and our example in the world. And I hope that you will join me in the struggle to continue this living tradition of grappling with change, of swimming in the river, especially when the currents are rough and the snow is falling, so that we can continue and make it to wherever it is that we are going together. That is my hope and my prayer. Amen, Ashe, and may it be so. Thank you. Through my head, but I wanted to actively listen to what you were saying, so I may have lost some of my threads here. But I'll try to find a couple of them. One, going back to The Common Reed by Deepa Iyer, I think we need to determine our audience and reach them. It's not our job to reach the entire audience. It's our job to reach the audience that we can reach, and then let them be the light that's shining that reaches their audience, and to let that audience be the light that reaches their audience. And I think if we all were more diligent in our living of our values, that more people would observe that and be influenced and affected by that, and then they would be changed, and then they would go out as a ripple effect and be the example in their spheres of influence. I am not going to go into a rural, all white community that but has beliefs that are not helpful to my health and try to change their minds. However, I might inspire some friends or family who are closer to those communities to be the ones to be their example. It's not my job to do that. It is not my role to do that. And so I think as a faith community, what we should focus on is doing what we do well, and not trying to do everything. We can't be the savior of the world, but we can save those that we have relationship with and the capacity to save, and in doing so save ourselves. So that's one thought that I had, and I've lost the others, so I'm not going to try to find them. But I hope that also on a system level, in terms of our institutions can only do so much as well. And so there are and ought to be a handful of issues that our institutions work really, really, really hard on, and be that light and be the leader and the voice in the wilderness. And then there are other things that we care about that are equally important, but we don't have the capacity to do everything. And so we support other organizations, other institutions for whom that is their issue, that is their work. And we collaborate and we work together, but we can't do it all. If we tried to do everything, we would wear ourselves out and be too thin. I have other thoughts, and I'm happy to stick around after the service and have more conversation. But in the interest of time, I see that Annie's ready to proceed with the next part of our service. And I thank you all for your participation.
All right. Thank you, Adrian. And now I think we should go to the closing words. The closing words are from UU Reverend Henry Messer, who asked the provocative question, if you were arrested for being a UU, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Think about it. Would there be? We all know the stories of well-known UUs, Susan B. Anthony and Dorothy Dix and Clara Burton, and the list goes on. Giants in social outreach, pioneers, doers of great work. But we don't have to be giants. We can look closer to home to see kindness and fairness and justice, integrity, someone reaching out, being there, sensing a need, lifting a spirit, taking a moment to listen. We stand together, living out the social gospel of our time. And what we said this morning, knowing our roles and living it. I do believe all of us, if rounded up, could justify being UUs, and that's a very good thing. And now Adrian will extinguish the chalice with the words that most of us know. We can say that with him in our hearts.
Thank you, Annie. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.